want to do a voice check to make sure that that you can hear me well. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ronald and Enterprise Uganda, for inviting me to, just share my thoughts about, talent, finding them, keeping them. So throughout this conversation, I'm really going to be more of sharing our experiences at Flip and my personal experience, being in business and running and trying to grow businesses. You already know my name, Abu Musuza. I co-founded Flip Africa with a fantastic lady called Neha Pandya. I'm not sure if she's on the call. And I have my colleague Oliver Nalule. And today I'll be sharing my thoughts on how do we find and how do we keep great talent. I like using the word talent rather than employees or great people, in fact, because we have to recognize the humanity of the people that that we hire. Very quickly, regarding Flip Africa, and Ronald touched on this a little bit, and Oliver shared a bit about this in the chat. We are really an end-to-end digital talent marketplace. So we founded Flip to really address the whole issue of youth unemployment, the fact that 85% of young people in Uganda and across Africa really never end up finding formal employment. And so we really wanted to find a new innovative way because we discovered that whenever we talk about unemployment, everyone goes the youth skills training way. So we are constantly building, a highly skilled generation, but still we don't have the answer for finding work. So essentially we built a platform where we began really as a freelance marketplace, and what that means is that if you have a short-term role that you need to fill, then Flip would be the place that you're going, right? If you are in a state where you cannot afford to hire someone full-time, you're looking for an accountant, you're looking for tax advisory, you're looking for any sort of professional service, but you cannot afford to have them as a full-time employee, you're not there, then Flip would be the place you come to basically hire someone to do that job for a week, and then you get the job done, and then you don't have to carry the burden of having them on your payroll permanently. So we essentially curated, a number of young people, onto our platform, and it's really, our process is quite direct. We find and recruit young people onto the platform. We take them through a workplace readiness training because that seemed to be one of the biggest issues. And then, we link them to jobs through our platform. And then we also manage the payments, through our e-wallet on the platform. That means that, we learned that there was a problem on both sides. One, the one that is more obvious is that a lot of young people end up doing a lot of work and then not get paid. I'm sure all of us entrepreneurs and and people who are working for teams here have faced a situation where you do a job, you're promised 200,000, you're paid 100,000, the other 100,000 is difficult to come by. So the e-wallet essentially allows us to collect payments ahead of time before a young person shows up to do the work that you need them to do. But the payment is only authorized by you. So that way we guarantee that they get the payment, in full, but the payment can also only be made if they deliver the work in full. So the other side of that equation is that a lot of companies, and again, many of us as businesses, we've hired people to do a job, they request for 30, 40, 50% payment, and then they never really deliver a good piece of work. They never deliver the work at all. So the e-wallet also helps that no one gets paid until the work is delivered. But we've also gone ahead and make sure that, we provide you ratings, deep information on talent so that you can know who is good and who isn't good, which is also sometimes a very big problem. And then once as we do all these jobs, we basically get into data and do data analytics, and then look at providing financial services in the future for young people who are working in the gig economy. So that's how we started. But eventually, like I said, our first product, which is on the left, was freelancers, which we still provide. But then a lot more companies came back to us, appreciating the quality of talent that we provided, and they asked us for full-time hires. And so we rolled out a premium product. And for a premium product, we basically require companies to pay 50% of 1 month's gross pay, in order for us to basically look for people and give you a short list of 3. So we cut down all the process and just bring 3 very good people before you, and you make the choice on which one you want to take. And those also come with further information. Who have they worked for before? What do those people say? We do reference checks for you. And so all you need to do is basically just have a conversation with them and then choose the right one. The third product that we've rolled out is managed services. There are organizations that want to hire a group of people, 10, 20, 100 people, but still on a short-term contract basis. Say if you want to do a data collection out in the field, customer surveys, or any other customer service projects that are really time specific. Then Flip basically can put together that team, manage that team for you in the field. And all you do is get the results on the other side, and then you pay a managed service fee. In terms of results, we have over 3,700 active talent profiles on our platform, and that number grows every day. We have 250 businesses plus that are actively using Flip, as a platform to learn about talent, to find talent, and we have completed over 535, and I say over because yesterday was another day, over 500 talent matches. That means projects that have been completed. But let's get into, great employees. And I began by asking myself, how do you define a great employee? Now, many of us define a great employee usually in terms of deliverables, right? Are they a salesperson that are bringing in, the biggest number of sales? Are they, whatever role, and they're basically hitting their milestones and their targets every month? That is very valid, right? And I think that is more of a given, in my opinion. But if you go deeper, I think a great employee is someone who understands, lives up to, owns the mission and vision of the organization, but also is a great contributor to the organization culture. Now, many of us here are business owners, and I imagine you have some sort of vision, some sort of mission of where you want the organization to grow, whether that is, what part of the market share you want to own, whether it is what kind of impact that you want to have, on your customers, and we have some sort of organization culture, who are we, how do we go about doing the work that we do, what kind of family do we have? So those definitions, I think, on what was in the job description, they need to be able to the business. So this is the framework upon which I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about finding a great employee. They can deliver on their deliverables, but they are also an asset to the growth of the organization's culture. The big question, though, is as the world of work is changing, and we all know that the world of work is changing, what work used to be has significantly changed. Whether that is because of events that we all have that are out of our control, right? The pandemic that happened that pushed us more to work more from home, and and figure out how do we continue to work and and collaborate. In fact, it shifted from working to collaborating with your team when they're based at home to still be able to deliver, or it is because generations are changing. How they see work has changed. How they see the workplace has changed. And so it has become, a bit different, in terms of what work is, what the work environment is, what workplace is. So how do you find good people when the world of work is changing, right? And so in that vein, I truly believe, and what we have learned is that we must adapt, to the changing world of work in terms of the way we find and the way we keep talent. And like I said, we're increasingly doing remote work. Some of us have realized that remote work is effective. We don't need to have a lot of infrastructure where we have talent to sit. Some of us were quite skeptical that people can stay at home and still deliver, on their work roles. But the pandemic forced us into that space, and we discovered that a lot of people can actually still do their work from home. And so some of us have kept part of that DNA. But also job roles are changing, right? If you cast your eye back 20 years ago, how many of us would have known that, there would be a role of a social media manager, and other roles that continue, to evolve. So how do we, keep finding great talent for roles that we probably are going to have to keep predicting, as the organization grows? And then, of course, like I said, a lot of the newer generation, a lot of the talent that is coming into the workplace is less formal, right? They shun formality, whether that be in dress code or, in the workplace, or how, or the gadgets that they use. A little close to a year ago, I hired a personal assistant at Flip, and she was very young. And initially it was a culture shock that she was actually, everything that she did on her iPhone, whether it was taking, minutes, in the meeting, whether she was writing minutes, whether she was writing an email, she just used her smartphone to do everything. And she still delivered on the work. Initially, of course, I was a little bit anxious. I was like, what kind of work are you going to deliver? But she definitely was one of the best personal assistants that I had. She was very effective at her work. She was very focused at her work, but she only relied on her smartphone. And she had a laptop, but she never used to carry it to the office. So this is the kind of talent that is popping out of, of institutions. They're still super talented. They're still qualified, but, the way they go about doing their work, you might find that it's going to bring a culture shock, to your organization. So we must adapt ourselves to recruiting, and how we keep that level of talent. So a few general comments that I'm going to make, especially from what we have learned as Flip, before I jump into sort of like the how-tos. First is there's vastly more information on talent than there has ever been before. And that is because of social media, right? Particularly because of social media. A lot of the talent that is coming out now, which we must rely on in order to keep our organizations going, most of their lives are out there, right? And there's an incredible amount of information you can learn about people, even before they come, into your interview processes. So I think that's a huge advantage, right? You can really tell someone the way they think, what their ambitions are, what they're working on right now, what their lifestyle is. So there's incredible amounts of information that people are voluntarily providing. And that has been such a huge resource, for us as an organization. As we go down, I will tell you that, just like we've been told about fundraising, that it is best for you to look for money when you don't need it. It is best for you to look for talent when you don't necessarily need them, right? Don't wait for a role to open up so that then you jump into a hiring process. So this vast information, when you're reading it, read it with the cap of, I need to build my team. I'm constantly building my team. Who could fit, my organization? Secondly, what we've learned is that CVs are increasingly becoming unreliable indicators of talent. And again, that's because people don't like writing CVs. People do not know how to write CVs. The reason why we used to write CVs the way we did 20, 30 years ago has completely changed, right? So what we have learned is that you cannot learn enough about someone using their CVs. And again, people embellish a lot in CVs. People put to do with, with the work that they've been done, they've been doing, or their abilities to deliver. Am I single? When was I born? What was my primary school? So all of that, is stuff that we have learned that might not be useful in you spotting the right person. But what we also see is that a lot of companies continue to rely on these as their source of info, their primary source of information for finding talent. And it's not surprising to see that a lot of people are struggling with, the people that end up within their organization. So what we must do is basically change our lens through which we assess talent. I've seen a lot of people who have missed great talent simply because the CV wasn't well written, simply because this young person doesn't know how to communicate, in the CV, their abilities. And simply because the way CVs are written now, they're following that kind of template. I was born here, and at this time, I went to this kind of school, and this is what I studied, and this is what I did. But, looking at someone and interacting with someone, and just trying to look around, using the information around you, can help you really spot people who might not look great on their CVs, but they're incredible people in terms of talent. So let's not miss out on, great talent. Yes, the CV can be an indicator to a very small extent, but you have to do a lot more work than, look at someone's CV and interview them being biased by what they wrote in their CVs, as a way of finding people. So let's jump in straight into how to find great employees. And again, these are things that we have learned. Just like I said, these vast amounts of information. And so what we have learned at Flip, and the method that I have used throughout in the two businesses that I have started, is that great employees are often spotted rather than the very formal process. You most likely are going to spot a great employee rather than, through a very formal interview process where you get 200 CVs and that kind of thing. And so I think what we must do as business owners is we must engage greatly in communities, particularly communities that are relevant in the spaces that we're trying to hire, right? So what's going on in the sales space, right? Is there a community for people who are in sales? What are they talking about? What are they discussing? Through those communities, you basically can find people. You start learning about Abu, who has been a salesperson for the last 2 years, and how they communicate, what they talk about, what kind of tricks that they're using. All of that information very quickly begins to tell you that this is a kind of person who fits my organization. This is a kind of person who is going to bring new information and new knowledge, a new approach, in the role. Examples, for example, at Flip, we have the Future of Work conversations that we host every once a month, in the middle of the month, and there we're discussing the world of work, how it's changing, and we have this huge number of young people. I think our listenership on Twitter Spaces is about 1,000 people every Future of Work conversation, and through that you can basically begin to understand people's thoughts about the workplace, how it's changing, what they would like, what kind of workplace I want to work in, what are the challenges that we are facing. We also have the Dress for Success initiative that we've just started, which basically allows young people to basically get formal wear. It sounds very petty, but we've seen a lot of young people show up, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of young people show up when they don't look professional. So we are getting people who have wear that they've discarded to basically donate it, and we basically make it available for young people for free to make sure that they look professional, in their first interviews and in their first days of work, so that they can secure employees. And then another great thing that I have learned is that your current team is a great spotter of talent, right? If you create a high-performing team, they don't want a less performing person to join the team. It will demoralize the team. So they are very, very capable of identifying who is the person who fits the team next. And it is always great to basically keep them on the lookout for the next great person to hire. At Flip and the organizations that I've worked with, I always tell people we are constantly hiring. It doesn't mean that tomorrow we are going to bring someone in. Budgets might not allow, etc. But it still doesn't stop us from from spotting the person who is really great and who fits the culture of the organization. And then we begin to engage them in communities as well. We make sure we bring them into the future of our conversations. We make sure, you know, they are part and somehow are constantly hearing about Flip, the organization. And then ultimately, when the space gets created, we know, and we have always converted them, you know, into a flipper, as we say it. They already feel they are part of the community. Use updated online hiring tools. They are great tools that we've come across at Flip, and we are using these tools to make sure that whoever comes on the Flip platform, we've basically assessed their readiness to get to work and their skill. You know, if they say that they are great accountants, you know, then we are basically going to use an online test to ask them to basically demonstrate that they understand the field of accounting, but we also want to take them through workplace readiness and communication and professional tests, you know, and we basically want in the future to make that available for you on the platform, you know, when you come. But these are some of the examples, you know, in eSkill, Predictive Success, Test Gorillas. These are all tools that you can get some free versions of online tests, and you put the people to the test, right? If someone says they're a great accountant, you know, just, you know, create a link and tell them, hey, do this test, you know, and then that test will show you their level of competence in that particular field. But you can also create other tests based on, you know, on what you want. As I said, you have to look deeper than skills and experience in order to find the right person. Again, the word here is, how do these people fit the culture of the organization? And you learn more about people in a conversation rather than in an interview. Now, the thing about interviews is that they're very time specific, both in terms of the time you're seated across someone and you're trying to learn about them, but also in terms of the time within which you must complete that hiring process, right? And then that forces you to basically ask very specific questions. They tend to be more directed towards, you know, the work, the job role. And I've seen that a lot of people tend to do interviews when they have everyone, you know, in the space across, right? So the MD is there, the HR is there, the head of department is there, and you do one interview and you make a call. The practice that I've seen that is really good is to layer these interviews, right? Let the head of department use your team currently, you know, because they know the organization, they've worked in the organization, they know the culture of the organization, and they know the kind of person who will succeed in the organization. Use them to be your first line of interviewers, right? Let the head of department, let the salesperson, if you're hiring the sales, let one of your great salespeople be the first person to interview this potential salesperson, right? And let them talk to them, let them understand, let them give feedback to the next level. If that is the sales manager, then let that be the sales manager or the HR manager. And then finally, probably the CEO will do the interviews. Now, at the level of CEO, what I have found to be successful is that at that point, you have already established that this person has the skills and experiences to do the job, right? So what I have done is I have focused those interviews. If I am interviewing someone as the last person to interview before we recruit, my focus is always on the person, having a conversation with the person about them, right? And understanding, who are you, you know, what are the kinds of values you've grown up with, you know, what is the path that has led you to this point, and how does this contribute to you going to the future? And for me, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to understand if this person fits the organization, if they fit the culture, if they are going to survive, you know, the workplace that we basically built, or they're not going to contribute. Let me give you an example. Once, when I was still in Village Energy and I was doing interviews, I interviewed a gentleman and he got through on competence and got to my level. And I sat down and I had a conversation with them and trying to understand the kind of family that they grew up in. And they grew up in a very patriarchal family. And so it turned out that his beliefs were that women just cannot be trusted with sort of like higher roles, the roles of sales manager, the roles of, you know, HR manager, like the managerial roles. And he actually specifically to myself told me that women are good for these smaller, simpler roles, you know? And it was such a big shock to me because in terms of experience, in terms of his ability to do the work, all the layers he had gone through. But at that point, that is really when I learned that this person cannot fit this space because we had female managers in the organization. So what is the relationship, what kind of relationship is it going to have with those female managers, right? So layer those interviews, and the final interview should really be about the person and have more conversations than interviews, than tell me about your experience, tell me about this, right? Just learn about the person. And then be careful with reference checks. People are putting their uncles who work at the UN, and their relatives who, work at prestigious organizations, but not people who have been their direct supervisors. So make sure that you're talking to the right people. And that's what we've learned. And at Flip now, we ask everyone, because we do reference checks for everyone who is on the platform, we've done a reference check, but we ask them to send us direct supervisors rather than their relatives. And the biggest advice I can give you is work with a competent recruitment partner. Look at it as part of your business. Look at it as an investment. So reach out to Flip, and just tell them, hey, there's this role that I'm trying to fill. I need great talent in that space. And then, Flip will basically provide you all of that because they've done all the work for you before. I'm sure there are questions. I just wanted to give you hints and rely more on basically, question and answers and your own contributions on what has worked for you and what hasn't, and any other questions that you have. But let's really jump quickly to how to keep great employees. What we have learned, at Flip. There is one thing that I have constantly learned about entrepreneurs that I have worked with, is that we spend most of our time pitching to external people rather than to our own team and employees, right? A potential investor, a potential board member, a potential mentor, they know the reason why we started the businesses that we started. They know our personal story and how it's connected to the business. They know our why, but our employees do not. And you as a CEO, you need to basically get into that vulnerable space and tell people, and I've told everyone at Flip the reason why I started Flip, and how my brother couldn't find work, and how he struggled to look after his own daughter, how one of my brothers has ended up in the Middle East and he's struggling to get out. These are very vulnerable stories, but I have seen that they really begin to plant the roots of a strong company culture, right? And this is a culture that we basically propagate, right? That if Oliver, is going to basically be onboarding someone, then Oliver has to basically sit down and tell them the reason why we are here. The reason why I am here is because this and this and this, right? So then we ask everyone, why are you here? What is that story that brings you here? And we make that part of the culture. And so it begins with onboarding. It begins with making sure that people understand their personal why. The organization why is pasted everywhere on the wall. It's in every document that they read, but their personal why. Why are you here? Why did you start this business? And why is it so personal to you? Why does it mean so much? That's the quickest way of beginning to build a company culture that people want to get committed to, because it goes beyond earning a salary into there's a personal commitment. There's a reason why we are here and we are committing to that. And I have seen that work very well at Flip. And if you come to Flip, or if you've interacted with someone from Flip, you will definitely get the sense that people are really committed at making sure that they address and they're connecting young people to the world of work. Very important is a clear and well-defined path to the top. Many small businesses don't build these clear paths, right? And what employees want to know is, fine, you've recruited me in this particular role, but what is the next step in this organization, and what does it take for me to get there, right? So at Flip, for example, we've already created a 10-year organization structure, right? Which shows how someone comes in as associate, senior associate, to manager, senior manager, vice president, even up to the CEO role. And in each of those, you can really estimate that within 6 years, I can be a vice president in this organization. I can be a senior manager in this organization. So we've defined all those steps, on how someone will go, and everyone can see their organization structure, and you can see where you are and you can constantly evolve and grow. And much to that is really training programs to help people advance in the organization. It is always infinitely better to hire from inside than outside, because you continue the culture of the organization, you continue to grow your people, and that continues to build stronger commitment to the organization, right? And training programs, I know they can be expensive, but there are great free online training programs. So I urge you, for example, to go and look at the Acumen Academy, right? The Acumen Academy is an online program that provides free courses, to anyone across the world, on specific things about organizations. So, for example, we have 2 employees currently who are going through the human-centered design training program. It is free. They signed up. They are doing the program, and so Nehar and I, who are the co-founders of the organization, have gone through these programs ourselves, and we can be reference points for them. If they have a challenge, if they want us to sit in on some of the homeworks that they're bringing home, we are happy to do that. But don't think of it as, oh man, I have to bring necessarily an external person who's going to train in something specific. Yes, that's very important. If you don't have it, there are free online training programs that your employees can use to basically get better and better. And remember, don't be afraid of training someone and they leave. It's better than not training someone and they stay, right? So define that path and provide them the support to basically grow through that path. And I think you'll get a lot more commitment from people. And here is something I have learned. Challenging work is motivating, right? It's not just about how much you're paying people, but the kind of work that you're giving them. But of course, paying people is very important. Pay them dignified wages, right? So the work that we do at Flip is tremendously difficult. If you've tried to if you've hired people and end up with people who just don't show up at work, or just don't show up at a day, in some random day at work, don't communicate about anything, those are the people we are constantly dealing with. We're dealing with 3,700 of them. It's incredibly difficult work, but I have seen that the team cohesion grows stronger and stronger the more each other helps the other. And so, don't be afraid. I've seen, again, a lot of us, because we are small businesses, we try to hold everything. We know the work that needs to be done. We are experts in that particular space. And so we carry everything. We're too afraid to delegate that work to the team, but delegate it to them. Let them struggle with it, let them learn. It's the fastest way that they can learn, but it's also the fastest way that you can build strong teams, connected teams who care for each other and will stand up for each other. And when you build that, then, ultimately you find people wanting to stay with those teams. They build personal relationships with their teammates. Pay dignified wages. We've seen a lot of companies that are not paying, wages, livable wages, right? And that means that people are going to constantly be, looking for the next thing. If you're paying me 250,000, who can pay me 300? We've seen people who have left for just the difference of 20, 30, 40,000 shillings. And that's really because everyone's just trying to make sure that, they cover their personal expenses, but then they also have enough to save. Of course, this is based on your budgets, and you're going to struggle with this, but as the organization grows, share in the success of the organization, by giving people bumps in wages. And this is probably one of the final comments that I have before we have an open conversation, is get out of the way. You've gone through the trouble of hiring great people, get out of the way. Let them do what they do best, right? Get out of the way and celebrate them along the way, right? So don't hire a great person and then micromanage them, and then make sure that every little thing that they do. Great people need the space to create, need the space to, to do and to express who they are, and, and do what they do well. So don't become sort of like a nag, of course, unless you can see that that people are not doing well, and you have to give them that extra thing in order for them to learn. But I suggest that if you're going to micromanage, then let it be because you're teaching someone how to do their job well. And at some point, you have to make a call on, okay, this person is strong enough to carry this role, and therefore I can, go back. And again, as owners of businesses, we need the space to think about finding the money, and building the team further, and making sure that we're finding bigger, opportunities for the business to grow. We just don't have the time, or you shouldn't have the time to basically micromanage people. So get out of the way of people, let them do what they do well, but also celebrate them along the way. At Flip, we celebrate every 100, whenever we hit the 100 mark in terms of how many jobs that we've completed, we celebrate 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. We are constantly celebrating these milestones along the way. And we've seen that contributes a lot, to people's motivation, to their desire to stay, and to consider. Maybe the last thing that I would say is there's a culture that we've created at Flip, that Fridays are days where, Friday afternoons, I would say. So Flip is sort of like a hybrid working place, right? So we don't require people to come into office every day. And again, we afford that luxury because of the kind of business. So this might not work for your business or any other business. But as Flip, people can do their work remotely. Monday and Friday are days when we are in the office, all of us. The team meeting is on Monday. So we do it physically. We discuss, the issues that everyone is facing, and we work throughout the day in the office. Friday is also a day to come back together. In the morning, we are working together. In the afternoon, we try as much as possible to do more team building things. Play games together, that help us think better as an organization. Or if we're not playing a game, we create a space for people to present some of the ideas that they have that can advance the organization, right? So whiteboard, let's talk about that idea. Let's discuss it. Let's get everyone's contribution towards that idea. Do we take it? Do we leave it? Do we shelve it? So we created that culture where, everyone feels they're appreciated, they're celebrated along the way. So thank you. And I guess I will just now open it to any thoughts, any comments, and any questions.
Thank you, Abu, for that interesting dissection of this topic. There are a couple of messages which came out, which I thought were very, very powerful. Get out of the way of your employees, pay dignified wages, pitch your business to your employees. That's interesting, because many times you think the people who need to hear about it are outside and not inside the business. I think those are really very powerful highlights, which kind of show that anyone who is serious about finding the right people there has to be a shift in mindset in the way you approach finding the employees. At this moment, we'll have an opportunity to get into a Q&A. I'll give an opportunity. If you want to ask a question, please go ahead and put your hand up, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask. We'll possibly take a round of about 5 and give Abu a chance to answer them, and then we'll continue in that flow.
I do see that there are questions in the chat.
Okay, yes, there are a couple in the chat. Let me just pick them up. Irene Oloya says, how do we work on a well-defined path to the top for employees? You talked about this, Abu, that every organization should have a path to the top. But the question here is, how do we work on that path? I think you'll capture that and you will answer it. Maureen asks, how best can one motivate workers to be goal-oriented? Even with the best wages, they still want to dodge work and input the minimum possible. So Maureen has said, I'm giving the workers good wages, but I see that they are still avoiding work. How do I get them to be goal-oriented? Possibly you tie that to how do you get them to believe in your vision as the entrepreneur? How do you get to that point? Abu, you will deal with that question. I don't know, let me just check if there are a couple of hands in the, I see a hand here from, who is this? Who has the hand up?
I see Matthias.
Matthias, Matthias, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much. My question is, the presenter talked about telling your business to your employees, but the instances where you explain your business to the employees, and definitely at the end, they go out there after getting the little money that they are getting, and then they start up something better, then start taking these key employees that they are sure of that so and so can deliver. How can we deal with that?
Thank you so much, Matthias, for that question. I think Abu has captured it. We also have a question from Abid here. Abid says, how do you hire staff when your company is just beginning and you can't afford to pay them highly? Yes, how do I hire staff when my company is just beginning and I can't afford to pay them highly? So Yeko asks, how do you work with a manager who creates losses to employees? Who creates losses to employees? I hope you have got that one, Abu. Then Katumba says, how can a startup of no more than 4 people go about finding great workers given the limited finance? I think it's similar to the earlier question. That is from Katumba. You could answer those and then we'll come back and answer the second round.
All right. So well-defined path to the top. So what we have done at Flip and how we've defined that is it begins with knowing where you want to be at a certain point, right? So what are your ambitions as an organization? Over the next 5 years, by 2028, what kind of results do you want to be achieving, right? In Flip, for example, we want to make sure that we have, 500,000 users, on the platform, who are constantly finding work on the platform. We want to make sure that we've completed, 1 million contracts on the platform. Those are the kinds of goals. We have revenue targets as well. So all of those goals, you know them, you define them. Where do you want to be? It can be also in terms of market share, right? That we want to have 10% market share, in the business that we're doing. So define that. And then ask yourself, in order to be this organization that has 10% market share, has 500,000 users on the platform, is completing a million job matches, or is selling X number of products, what kind of organization structure must you have in order to achieve what you want to achieve? What should your technology look like? What should your sales team look like? What should your accounting team look like? All of those things, them, and build out the organization structure 4 or 5 years from now, right? The CEO, do you have, managing directors or vice presidents, depending on what kind of language you use, who is below them, who is below those, and you go all the way down to the lowest employee, right? So once you have defined that really, at the end of the day, is the beginning or the structure of the path to the top, right? And so what we've done at Flip, we've decided to categorize people because we want to manage their growth, right? So if you're at the entry level, you are associate, right? And so when you ask Oliver her role, she will tell you, senior associate for business development. That's because she came in as an associate, and a year later, she became a senior associate. And that is also based on certain results, right? So each one of those levels, each one of the roles in those levels has a certain, deliverable, right? You're supposed to do this number of sales. Are you constantly hitting them? Are you exceeding them? Are you showing other traits that will allow us to basically take you up, so that you have a team of people responsible below you, right? So define that: associate, senior associate, manager, senior manager, vice president or managing director, and all the way to the top. Define it the way you want to. Different organizations do it differently, and there are a lot of resources online that you can use to do that. The one thing I have to warn you about is that not everyone who delivers a high level of results is a good manager of people, right? I have seen a lot of organizations that have put people who are not fit to be managers simply because they're doing the biggest number of sales, right? So you have to understand your people, right? And say, okay, this person may not necessarily be delivering the highest number of results, But when I see the work that they're doing, they are constantly organizing people. They're constantly the ones, mobilizing people to say, hey guys, the meeting is starting at this time. We need to, they're constantly the thought leaders behind. Look for that DNA in someone rather than only results. You will be lucky and find people who have that DNA and also do the highest number of sales, right? That is the ideal person, but not necessarily that you'll find both of them in the same person, but you still have to promote people. So that's the caveat that I would say. But yeah, so well-defined path is really where it's defined by where you want to be in 5 years, what the organization will be structured like 5 years from now, and then you begin to basically slot people in, who are the associates, who are, and how do they go to the next level. You will find that because you don't have vice presidents, managing directors, and all of those things, you will find that as the CEO or the MD of the organization, you have to take on those roles. You have to play multiple roles as the organization is young, but as it continues to grow and as the members of your team continue to show the ability to do this work, pass it over down to them, right? And that will be helpful. And of course, like I said, training programs, layer that on, and I think you will begin to have, so these are just short highlights, but there are ways of, and there are people that you can talk to your board, talk to your mentors, and ask them to help you develop that path to the top. How do we motivate workers to basically achieve goals? And I think the explanation to this is that some people still get a good salary, but provide minimum effort. You have the wrong person in the role. You have the wrong person in the team. Part of your organization culture should be hard work. Every organization culture, even if you are very informal, it has to be part of your DNA that you have hard work. And this is why I tell people that look for people who fit the organization rather than simply people who have the experience to do the work that the organization does. Find the fit. And you want people who work hard, people who are disciplined, people who basically understand their role and they're focused on executing their role, people who take their work seriously, right? You will find that it's very unlikely that they'll provide minimum effort for a good salary, right? So think about, so if you have those kinds of people, then I will tell you directly that you have the wrong person in the team, and you probably want to think about finding someone who fits the culture of the organization, unless the culture of the organization essentially allows people like that to thrive in the organization, to which I will tell you, you need to change that culture. You need to make sure that hard work is part of the culture of the organization. And then you will basically begin to change that kind of stuff, right? So find the right people who fit the organization, who I think all of us here want hard workers. So that should be part of the culture of the organization. And in terms of motivation, I think, if you build the right work environment, if people come into an environment where people are working hard, they will be naturally motivated. People get lifted by, the pace of the organization. And if they can't get lifted, then again, I will tell you, you don't have the right people, in the organization. Then there was a question about, you pitch your idea and your work to, to employees, and then they leave and they steal the employees, they steal the idea and they do it better. To be honest with you, my experience is that 90% of the time, they will not be able to do it better, right? All of us here, or most of us here, have built an organization, and you know what it takes to get your organization from a one-person show to where you have gotten it now. As a growth business, you have clients, you have demands, you're employing people, you have 10 employees, you know what it takes. It's not just a matter of copy and paste. There's so much that goes into getting an idea off the ground and doing it. It is absolutely very unlikely that someone is going to steal it, especially if it's an employee of yours, to steal it and go copy paste and do they still have to do the work of finding the money to do the work. They still have to do the work of finding the employees. They still have to do the work of doing it by themselves over a long period of time. They still have to do the work of being rejected 100,000 times before someone finally says it. Do they have the mettle to do that? So it's not about the person just stealing the idea. It's really about the characteristic of the person. Not everyone can be or will be an entrepreneur. So personally, I'm not afraid of pitching the idea that Flip is, because what we have gone through the last 4 to 5 years that we've gone through to get Flip where it is, no one is just going to go take my employees, and start doing what they do. And within a year, they're doing it much better. They still have to go through the process. So I'd say, don't be afraid of that. So and go ahead and pitch your business to your employees. They have to understand it. If they're going to do the work well, they have to understand it. No one is going to do the job well if they really don't understand why this organization exists, how it came to be, and where it's going. What are our ambitions? How do we do the work that we do? All the way to the last person down, you have to do it if you want to keep, the right people. Hiring at the beginning, a bit, and I think it's the same as the last question, no more than 4 people. What I have learned and what I do when I'm starting a business, when I am still in the early stages, I don't have, enough money, I do not go for experience, I go for depth of work. I go for young people who have the depth and the thirst to do a huge amount of work. We all know in the early days how much work we do. You're putting in night shifts, you're putting in extra hours, you're working on, on dead ends most of the time. So what you're looking for initially in the beginning, go for young people who have the character that needs your business to survive. Who can you see, who can you see yourself in, right? So I usually go with young people who have a huge capacity for work, right? It's not just about coming in 8 and leave at 5 and then they go. It's really about someone who has a deep capacity of work. Ask Oliver how many times she's had to leave office at 8 p.m. And again, our definition is that you work 8 to 5, but their commitment to the clients that they have has pushed them in order to do that. And again, in many times, we are working, by 4 a.m. I'm up, I'm doing the work. By the time, the rest of the team comes into office, there's already stuff, if they have to deal with it, there's already questions that I have asked them, right? So in their minds, they are seeing that, hey, Abu has been up at 4, they've been working, he's been working. How do I just come 8 to 5 and I leave? And even when my team is not, my team calls me on Sunday, and say, hey, there's this problem, that we need to solve. Someone needs to get paid. It's just amazing. And that's really just us going out and saying, who fits the team? Who has that deep capacity for work? That's the number one thing that we're looking for. If I went for someone who's going to cost me $3,000 a month, and they have incredible experience, I don't think that they can survive the vagaries of early businesses, right? Today, we haven't been able to find a client. The clients have said no, etc. Those vagaries are so difficult. And I'm also spending money that I potentially don't have, right? So look for character, look for depth of work, look for appetite to learn, willingness to learn, hunger to get into a role. Those are the things. And then at the organization, shape them to be the kind of people that you want them to be, right? So they can come, at a budget that you can handle. But also, like I said, whenever you get a success, share, in that success with, with your team. So have a plan on how you're going to increase their pay because you want to keep them, right? Of course, the danger is always, there are always big companies that are going to start supporting people and saying, hey, I can pay you 2 times the amount of money that you're being paid there. And what will save you in that instance is the culture of the organization, right? Have they built a belonging, in that organization? And then they have to make a choice. Am I going to go into an organization where, I don't connect with people and I'm just getting paid, or do I want to stay and be part of something really great and, and I'm working with it? There was a question, I think this is the final question of the questions that were asked. Manager who creates losses to employees. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that a manager who employees just don't want to work under and employees are ending up leaving. Again, you have the wrong person in the organization, right? Your number one task is to make sure you keep the people that you have. Keep the people that you have, because it allows your organization to grow. There is a danger in constantly finding a new person to fit, in a role that an old person has left. It takes you back. it takes you back all the time. Yes, you recover eventually, but the momentum is lost. So if you have someone who's leading to people leaving, then you need to make sure that that person either changes the way they are dealing with the people that they're managing, or that you fit another person in that role, right? So again, keep your eyes on your people, constantly interact with people. You will pick up these things. You will pick up these things early enough for you to be able to pull someone on the side, have a fireside chat with them and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, and this is leading to people leaving the organization, right? So you need to fix that. Build a culture of honest and direct feedback. What that means is that you don't want to give people feedback and they feel that they're being attacked. They feel that, you hate me. That petty culture, you want to get rid of it. You basically want to have a culture where when I tell you you're not doing something right, you understand that I'm giving you feedback to help you grow. And therefore, you need to learn how to take it. If you can't take it, then you're really not in the right team, right? So make sure that you're building that culture. We have one of my co-founder is actually from the States. And if you've worked with someone from the US, you know how direct they are. And again, Oliver will tell you how direct Neha is with her feedback. But everyone understands that, look, this is because we want you to do better. This is because we want you to grow. That's why we're giving you this feedback directly. And people have learned, to take feedback and not feel like, oh, people hate me, or, this person, just doesn't like me. I think that's petty. And that, for me, would be the number one reason I would let you go out of the team, because we don't have the time to be petty. We have the time to take what we've been told and work on it, and just keep advancing. So maybe another set of questions. I hope I've sufficiently answered those questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Abu. I think there are a couple of more questions coming through. Let me see. There's a question here from Eric. Eric says, as a new recruitment manager, how do I make sure my staff deliver averagely without firing them? So I've just taken on the role as a recruitment manager, and I feel like some guys have to go. What should I do before I let them go? I hope I have interpreted your question right, Eric. What should how do I make sure staff deliver averagely before without firing them? Yes, Bossa says, how do I compel good workers when I'm just starting? I think you have touched on this, but you can possibly touch on it again. It seems like something, especially for the young companies, there is a young.
Sorry, can you ask that? Can you ask that again? Sorry. And
how do I compel, or how do I motivate good workers when I'm just starting? I think it ties into a question you answered earlier about that difficulty between having not having sufficient resources, but wanting a good team. So you'll possibly touch on that. I don't know if there are any hands. I'm trying to look at, yes, there's a hand here. Maureen, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, in regard to workers, what I've realized is we as employees are not very good at setting our expectations. You employ somebody, you tell them they're all fine, but they don't have the nitty-gritty of the expectations, the deliverables, and the timelines as well. So when they don't perform to the best we are expecting in our heads, we again think they are bad workers and we want to toss them out. But we find that most of the SMEs especially don't have contracts, don't undertake proper training, don't even have manuals for training, and then don't even have meetings like weekly meetings. So what I've realized is this is where the problem also lies on our part as employers.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Right. Thank you, Maureen, for that comment. I think you'll touch on it a bit more. I think Maureen raises a very important issue. And I think from the perspective of the employer, are you actually making it clear what you want your team to be able to achieve? Yes, if there is a hand, please do put it up. Let me just check the chat to see if there are any other questions which are coming in. Yes, I think Chigwe is saying, what words would you coin for vision, mission, and organizational culture? I think possibly Chigwe's question here is, how do I think about the vision, the mission, and my and the organization culture. You touched on them, Abu, as you shared, but someone who is trying to coin this for their business, how should they go about this process? Mark, probation with coaching and deliverables within a period. I think Mark was making a comment to build on an argument which you're making. Yes, there's a hand from whose hand is up? Josephine.
Geoffrey.
Yes, Josephine, please go ahead.
Is it Josephine? I see Geoffrey.
Geoffrey, go ahead. Josephine, were you asking?
Yes, I wanted to ask, how do you deal with NSSF for the workers?
How do you deal with NSSF for the workers? Abu, please touch on that. Then Geoffrey, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Geoffrey.
Yeah, you know, at times get tricky, so you have to ask that so that you don't. I'm trying to, mine is more of a comment and based on our experience. I know a lot of these are SMEs. I can say you start small, started by owners and the workers. As they keep growing, then that's when you start hiring. It's rare to see an SME like you start with 10 workers, and most of the time they really start with a few and they keep growing. Well, for people now on the streets really not working, and we bring the students and then when
Geoffrey, you seem to be breaking up. I think we missed quite a bit of your submission.
Can you get me now?
Geoffrey, I think your network is not very good. We could consider possibly, I know that you can type your comment, and we could possibly try again after that. Abu, do you want to go ahead and just answer those? Then we'll see if we can have a last round.
Yes, I also just took Charles's last question about is it important to have salary rates matched with academic qualifications? So that's the last one that I've taken down. New HR manager. I did kind of get the question very well, but I'm going to sort of like try and answer it in different ways so that I try and capture it all. How do you get people to deliver? You found them, you found them there. And they were not delivering. They were moderate. They were average. How do you get them to deliver? I think the one thing that you need to stop believing is that you're necessarily going to sort of like wave a magic wand and people start delivering. There are reasons why people don't deliver. And it's in many instances, it's not necessarily that, it could be that they just don't know what they're doing or you don't have the right people in the space. So first thing you ascertain is, do you have the right people in the right roles? The person that is in sales, do they know how to sell? Do they know, do they know the business? Do they know, but it's actually a much larger picture, what culture are they working in, right? What time do they show up? What time do they, some of us, our organizations have become so lax that we allow people to basically, and again, employees, will be employees. They'll take the easy way out, right? So if I don't have to report, if I don't have to, account for my time, if I don't have to, then ultimately, that will become the culture of the organization. It will become a space where people come to have conversations, right? Rather than, sit down and get the job done. So I would say, the beginning is to sort of like look at, I would have a conversation first with, with the CEO, or the managing director and say, hey, look, people are not delivering, right? So either we have two choices. Either we have to let them go and find people who can deliver, or we have to look at our organization and see if we've built a culture and an environment that encourages them to basically deliver the results. So it has to be a much bigger thought process. that needs to be looked at. Also ask yourself the question, because if you're a hiring manager, I take it that you're an employee. Ask yourself the question: are you in an organization or in the right environment for you to deliver on this whole idea of people delivering, right? Because I can imagine it's difficult, The reason why organizations are the way they are is because someone has deliberately created them to be that way. So I can imagine the difficulty in the conversation that you're going to have with your managing director or with the CEO about the culture of the organization being lax and allowing people to, in a sense, it's a criticism of the CEO and the kind of business that they have built. So it's a conversation that you need to navigate with skill, but you will find that there are people who are like, you know what, your role is to basically make sure that people are delivering. If you can't leave, I would say you're in the wrong work environment, right? So ask yourself that question. Am I in the right organization? Am I in an organization that is going to allow me to deliver? Because soon enough, you're going to end up also fitting in that culture. And then that affects your ability to deliver, that affects, the way you go about your work. So how do you do that? I'd say a conversation with the CEO is a great place to start. I'd say an understanding of what kind of work environment. Observe. What time do people show up to work? What kind of accountability structures are there? What kind of, and being an HR person, you are directly responsible for how people advance in the organization, whether that be training or whether that be in them seeing their growth, and their path to the top. Are all of those things defined? If they are not, then you probably have a problem, a much bigger problem on your hands. It's not simply just that people are not going to the field and doing sales. There's a reason why they're not going. And, it's a much bigger thing. So it requires a bit more understanding of the kinds of organizations and structures that you've built, before you basically can change the way people are doing. So there are structures outside of the stuff that need to change. Motivate good workers at the start. I think, like you said, I touched on that question already. And again, really humble yourself. You can't pay people as well as you probably would want to. So sell them on the vision, care about your people. Tell them why you're doing the work that you're doing, connect with them as human beings, but still hold them accountable. Like I said, hard work is motivating. Give them the work, right? I think it's far more demotivating for people not to have work, and the work that you give them, they can do in 2 hours of the day, and the rest of the time, they're basically just seated clicking through solitaire and all of those things. It becomes boring, right? Every one of us wants to be productive. So give them the work, let them do the work. I've seen a lot of people who are complaining, my God, the work is so much, but they report the next day to work, right? And I think the day you reduce that work, they will feel like, oh, there's just not enough to do. So give them the work, let them do the work. Maureen, I appreciate your comment on setting expectations. We've seen a lot of companies that come to us at Flip, and especially in the space of marketing, they're looking for salespeople in the space of sales. They're looking for salespeople. And they come and tell us, oh, we need salespeople. We expect them to sell this number of products a month, and this is how we'll pay by commission, blah, 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 blah. They have that figured out, but they haven't done a market survey on what kind of customers they're selling to. They haven't done sales funnels to know, who is buying the most of our products. They haven't done a market analysis or sales analysis to see what kind of profile of people they are that are buying their products and where they are and, how much they normally spend. They haven't done all of that background work, and they're throwing young people into the deep end. And 2 months later, they're calling us and saying, hey, this person doesn't know what they're doing. But what we've learned is actually, normally what we've seen is that after 3 months, then the people that we've placed in these organizations as salespeople begin to click and the sales begin to kick in. Why? Because they've taken that time to figure those things out by themselves as individuals. But this is the customer. So you'll find so many of people in your businesses or in a lot of SMEs, the knowledge about who is the right profile of the customer is not with the organization, but with the individual in the organization, right? That this person knows who to sell to. That's why we have some people who are star performers and others who are like, they're completely off, that kind of thing. There's nothing as motivating as getting customers consistently, right? That I went out today, 10 customers signed up, The next day, another 10 signed up. That is the most motivating thing, even more motivating than team building. At the end of the day, if you create that space where young people will succeed because you've done the homework for them, and you tell them this is the profile of the customer that buys our product, that has bought historically, this is where we've found them, go there and do the sales. Once they start doing that, you have a happy employee, you have an employee who sings praises about your organization. And that is really, at the end of the day, about setting your goals, setting your expectations, but also, giving them contracts, make them feel secure, and then keep progress with them, right? Say, hey, we are growing by this number. Let's celebrate that number, right? And celebration is really just buy a cake, cut it in office, eat it with people, right? So Maureen, I really appreciate your comment. Mr. Chigwe, about vision, mission, and organization culture. At the end of the day, how do you word it? I'll very simply tell you, a vision is that thing that you probably are not going to achieve, but is motivating for you to continuously chase, right? So don't set a vision that we want to reach 1 million customers. You reach those 1 million customers, you don't have a vision anymore, right? That's why you see people set visions that are more positioning, right? Say we want to be the leading organization in the space of talent, right? What does leading mean, right? We have the biggest market share. We are the #1 choice in terms of people wanting to come and work at Flip. These are things, by the way, we actually have said, right? We want Flip to be the #1 choice for employees to come and work to. So we have to set that as a goal and build an environment that people thrive and enjoy coming to, and that kind of thing. So those are the things, sort of like positioning longer term. You probably won't reach a point where it's like, yes, we've achieved, because competition is constantly chasing you. If you achieve and you're the market leader, and then you're like, oh, we've done it, before you know it, someone will come and overtake you, right? So it's a constant thing, right? That's the vision. Mission is something, that basically captures your vision, but in a more demonstrable way, right? Be the leading. How are you going to be the leading, right? We leverage technology to connect people, we are constantly, rated this in our market, in our market surveys, that kind of thing. It's more so you capture the vision in a statement, in a way that when someone reads it, they're like, oh, okay, I can see what you mean, when we're demonstrating this. Organization culture is a combination of so many things. It's the vision, it's the mission, it's the values of the organization. As you chase your vision and mission, what is the framework within which you're going to chase that mission and mission? What is acceptable and what is not? Is it acceptable for you to go around bribing everyone in order for you to be #1? So what are the values within which you're delivering that? But then, beyond the values, what are the things that are important to us, right? As an organization, right? We pride ourselves in this, we are constantly, aware of this environment, we believe in hard work. So it's a combination of a group of things that you must capture, right? In how we do what we do. And that is what people are supposed to demonstrate. And you must constantly ask people to evaluate themselves against those things, right? So organization culture is those words, and then how you constantly show up at work. What do you do as a leader? What does your team do? What are the little things that you're doing constantly, right? So that's a much bigger conversation than being able to capture here in these few minutes. But those are basically startup. The starting building blocks for for organization culture and storytelling. By the way, storytelling is a huge part of organization culture. Tell your story. Let your people tell their story and break down those barriers between people and let them understand each other. Josephine, NSSF, how do you deal with it? Pay it. There is no two ways about it. Pay it. And so that basically would then inform you whether you are able to hire more people or not. Because paying people salaries is not just about paying, the salary, and it comes with payee, it comes with NSSF, so pay it. If you cannot pay it, if you cannot afford to pay that and to pay people full time, come to Flip, find a freelancer who comes in a specific time as a consultant, and then pay them for the work done, right? Until a point where you've grown the organization to a point where you're like, okay, I've attracted enough investment and I can hire more full-time, right? Hiring full-time is really a combination of having enough work to keep someone busy throughout the day. What we have learned is that a lot of people are hiring full-time simply because they have a business. And therefore they're like, oh, I will need an accountant. But an accountant, really, they're utilizing 30% of their time. So you're paying 100% for 30% of time, right? So in those instances, find a freelancer who can come in once a month, twice a month. They do your books, they file your taxes, and then they leave, right? And then you don't have the obligation of carrying them on your payroll until a point where you have grown the business enough to, one, have enough work to keep them busy and fully employed, and two, you have enough money to pay their salary, their taxes, and their social security. Those three things is really what payroll is about. It's not really just about, and usually when we're hiring, we're just thinking, oh yeah, if I hire someone and I pay them 700,000, yeah, I think I can afford that. No, it is, $1 million plus that you really have to pay in terms of payroll. Geoffrey, starting small and keep, and keep growing. I think that's a comment that you were making rather than a question. I totally agree. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Go slow, grow, build something valuable, and then the business will tell you where to go. It will tell you that I need more people because the amount of things that we are dropping now, people are just inundated with the amount of work. Clients are starting to complain that you're not getting back to them in time. Then you need extra hands-on. And finally, Charles's question, which is interesting. Is it right, or should we basically pay? Is it important to have salary rates matching with academic qualifications? I know the general practice is when people are hiring, they'll say that, salary is based on level of skill and qualifications. I have seen countless times where people with qualifications do not deliver on the job. They do not deliver on the job if you rely on qualifications. And this has happened as recently as 2 days ago, when an organization that I'm consulting for in some spaces ended up hiring a group of researchers to do a certain research, and part of that research required them to do a business analysis of this particular sector, and they ended up not doing a good business analysis. The report that was written, and again, they were super qualified. These were doctors, in this specific sector, and then they had started a research company, but at the end of the day, they were just researchers, they were not business people, right? So did they have the qualifications? Yes. But did they have the skill to deliver on the assignment? No. So for me, like I said, I look beyond qualifications. For me, qualifications just like, okay, so you have the content, right? And if me as a CEO who doesn't know everything, come and ask you a very technical question, you will be able to give me the answer. But more important, can you do the job? Do you have the ability to do the job? Do you have the ability to deliver on the assignments? Do you have the ability to work with people and manage people? All of those things come into play. So for me, not necessarily, no. Salary, I think, has got to match a person's ability to get the job done, to fit the team, and their ability to grow and how quickly they grow. So you determine how much you earn by how quickly you grow in the organization. I don't know if you want to do a last round of questions.
I think I'll just quickly ask that you answer that last question which came through. I think it came through from Juliet. How do you deal with an employee who left for greener pastures, found that they were not as green as she thought they were, and wants to come back to the team, but they did not even bid farewell when they left? What do I do? I think that's a straight question. And when you also, yes, I think Ronald asks, when you are also an employee earning a salary, also employees of other businesses in your business, how do you separate savings, recurrent expenditures of your business and family and yes, I think what I was asking, how do I manage the, I think it's specifically, how do I separate the savings and the recurrent expenditures in my business, yet I'm employed elsewhere? You could quickly answer those ones and we can wrap up in the next few minutes.
Okay, living badly. Someone who lives badly, someone who, I think for me, it's a signal of a lack of professionalism. And being professional should be part of your organization culture. That's what it always comes back to. So if someone, just escapes, and again, we've seen these happen. It's happened in my first business, Flip Africa, and I learned a lot at Flip because I did things really badly at Flip, really, really badly. And I think again, Oliver probably is the person to pass judgment of this. But I have really worked hard. I treat people right. They are, they stick, and I think we've done a fairly good job. We haven't lost many people from Flip, since we started 4 years ago. So roughly people have stayed 3 years, 2 years, since they joined. So someone leaving badly, someone who sneaks out like that, and they don't recognize their teammates. They don't recognize that, this was, so either you are doing things badly, and you're not treating them badly and not treating them well, and people are looking for the first sign of leaving. So assess yourself first. Why are people leaving the way they are leaving? Or they themselves are not professional, and therefore you don't want to have that person back in the organization. People make decisions, and you have to live by those decisions, right? If you end up in a place where the pastures are not greener, they're not. You are not in the business of, I would say, sort of like those kinds of petty conversations. You have a business to build. Focus on that. Someone left, is there an internal staff member who can fill that role, or do you need to find someone out to fill that role? Once you've plugged that gap, move on. Even if that person, by the way, even if that person was a star performer in your organization, if they are not professional, right? There are people who are going to deliver amazing results, but they will leave everything burnt in their way to deliver those results, right? The team is completely left disorganized. You're completely left with problems on your hands and that kind of thing. Don't sacrifice everything that you build for this one person who basically gives you, amazing results. Always choose your organization over an individual. Always choose your organization over an individual. It does get sometimes more complicated than that. We've gotten in a situation, and again, you must understand the organization politics. I'll give you an example. At Village Energy, we got into a situation where one employee got into, and I'm no longer the, so I'm no longer the CEO now, but at the time, one employee sort of like was really disrespecting, the leader of the organization, one of the leaders of the organization. And we really wanted to let them go. But that person, was chasing an amazing business, right? And it was worth, in the billions of shillings. So at the end of the day, we basically had to decide, if we let this person go, there's a real risk about losing that business, because we hadn't signed in the dotted line with that business, and this person had grown so much connection with those people, that we felt that if they left, that might set us, a few months back in terms of chasing that business. So what I'm warning you about this is that, don't have your business being sort of like so connected to one particular employee, right? Have options, have people, if the deal is big, have multiple people in contact with that organization. Give yourself some options, because at the end of the day, we had to choose to let that person go because they were really toxic in the organization, but we really had to keep chasing the business, right? So having people step in, and also being alternate contacts, is something that you want to do. So, if someone leaves badly, you don't want them to come back. That's completely unprofessional, and you have to stand by those rules, in the organization. So now this question When you're also an employee earning a salary or salaries, also employs other people in your business, how do you separate your savings, recurrent expenditure on your business, and your family expenditure? I think at the end of the day, this question, sorry about the alarm outside in the parking. I think this question goes straight down to separating your personal expenses from your business expenses, right? Your business is completely different from you. In fact, you must understand that by law, if you didn't know this, and I'm sure many of you know it, by law, the business is a completely different entity. If you have registered it, that is, right? It's recognized as a different person. That business can sue you, that business can fire you, that business can do, even if you are the one who started the business. What essentially you're doing is that you're signing on behalf of the business. Because the business doesn't breathe, think, walk, move, cannot attend meetings, that business then appoints you to represent it in those activities. If there's a decision that has to be made, you're making the decision on behalf of your business, right? If you do things badly, if you're taking company expenses and you're using them in personal expenses, you're mixing up all of those things, then one of two things is possible. We live in a country where the state is not very particular and very tight on these rules, so many people get away with it. But in more developed states where the rules are very tight, you must have had stories of so many people being sued, because they took, they put their personal expenses on the business, right? So be very careful about that. If that doesn't happen, in a country like ours, you're going to end up spending all of the business money, and ultimately your business will crumble. So one, pay yourself a salary. Let the business pay you as its, top official, a salary, and then use that salary to determine your personal expenditure, your family expenditure, your savings, right? So separate your expenses from the business, pay yourself a salary. And if you're running a small business and you still are not paying yourself, that's a huge mistake. Pay yourself, put yourself on the payroll, because that's when you will really know the business's ability to take care of its employees, including you. And if you ever look for an investor wants to make sure that the business is paying you. Yes, you can value the time that you haven't paid yourself and say the business owes me this amount of money, right? But ultimately, the only way you can separate yourself from the business is let the business pay you a salary, no matter how small, and use that to separate your personal family expenditures and savings. I hope I have answered that question.
Right, great. Thanks a lot, Abu. We have run beyond our time, which is usually 10:30. A big thank you to you and the Flip team for sharing your hearts with us. It's been a very insightful conversation. Yes, we shall share with you the recording. Someone asked in the chat box whether we'll be able to share the recording. We'll share the recording. Everyone who registered will be able to give you the recording. I think we'll also attempt to also share the slides with you. Abu will share with us, and we can be able to share those with you on your emails. Please do reach out to Flip. This is the business they do. Abu has been sharing from his experience, from the work they have done. Abu, I know of a couple of customers who have told me about the work you do, and they're grateful. So a big thank you for that. And let's keep pushing. There are solutions in the market which can make this less painful. Flip is one of them. It's a way of making the process of finding and keeping the right people less painful. But as Abu has rightly said, you, the leader of the business, this responsibility still falls on you. You have to make sure your people are motivated. You have to make sure you make the right decisions. You bring in the right people. And if a time comes when you need to let go of the wrong people, you actually do that. So a big thank you. And thanks everyone who has joined us. We'll be back next week. Next week, we will specifically talk about debt, and we'll be sharing with you on your emails. But a big thank you, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you, Ronald. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Abu.